we'll do one more question on the PDC World Championships, and that's because the schedule is out for the pre-Christmas rounds, round 1 and round 2 of the tournament. If you could go just to one session, though, which one would it be?
I think after my late call-up as a guest at the Grand Slam last month, I would be snapping your hand off for a golden VIP ticket from Barry Hearn like you treated me to a few years ago now, Burton. And for me, it does feel a little bit strange not to have a trip to Ali Pali penciled in the diary this year, because apart from the year you mentioned it when it was behind closed doors, I've been every year since I think it was 2014, and my Ali Pali debut had the 2-9 darters, not by me, but Terry Jenkins and the late Kyle Anderson. What an unbelievable day that was. And pretty much every year since then, me and my brother, a few of my mates, we have gone to Ali Pali, but this year we're taking the year off. So yeah, looking at that schedule, if someone was to offer me a VIP session, I would be looking down that list right now and going, yeah, there's a couple that I'd like to go to. And I think the first one that jumps off the page is this upcoming Saturday, the afternoon session on the 16th. You've got Connor Scott, one of our guests on our very first episode back in 2017. He's making his Ali Pali debut, so it's a big occasion for Connor. You've also got Darren Pennell. Great to get him back on the show this year. We had him on, I think it was 2020, early 2020, when he had a tour card for a few years. Then he went back to Australia, and if you recall our chat with him in the summer, this year was his comeback to darts on the DPA circuit. I think he won 11 events in the end to get to Ali Pali for the first time. And at one point, probably this time last year, he wasn't playing any darts. He was pretty much retired. So that's quite a story. That would be good to go and follow how he gets on. And closing out that session, you have got Dave Chisnell against Cameron Menzies or Rusty Jake Rodriguez, which could be a pretty good game. And just thinking back to the trip to the Grand Slam last month, I did get the chance to meet Chizzy's manager, Rog, for the first time. And he speaks very fondly of you, Burton, and it was a good laugh that we had. So potentially to round off that session, catching up with Rog for a shandy or two would top it off quite nicely. But aside from that, I'm going to fast forward a full week, actually. I'm going to go to Saturday the 23rd. It is the last afternoon session before the Christmas break. So these are all going to be second round matches that I'm looking at here. And just reminiscing to one of my trips to Ali Pali, I've probably said it before, but a friend of mine I went with wanted some tips on the darts, so I gave him all 4 underdogs in the session. I think the odds were something around 100 to 1. He didn't believe me, thought I was winding him up, so I said, all right, I'll put £1 on with you. And all 4 of those results came in. If only we'd have had a bit more faith, we could have had a bigger winner there. But I'm looking at that session and I'm going, it could happen there. You've got 4 of the unseeded players, whoever comes through, I think they've got a chance of causing the upsets in those games. I think you've got Johnny Clayton is one of those games. You mentioned him earlier. He's not been in the greatest of form this year against Steve Lennon or Owen Bates. Owen Bates, who is going to be on the tour for next year. And then you've also got in that session as well, Daryl Gurney could go up against Steve Beaton, or the player who I think it will be, Wessel Nyman, on his debut as well. Callum Ridds could be up against Ricardo Pietrexco, again, a player that we've seen win on the Euro Tour this year. That could be a very tough matchup for him. Or it could be Makuru Suzuki. She could make that bit of history, win at Ali Pali for the first time. And the other game in that session, Kim Hybrex against Richard Veenstra or Ben Robb. I think whoever comes through that first round game could be a handful for Kim Hybrex as well. So for potential upsets in that second to last session before we go for the Christmas break, that could be a good one to go to as well.
Well, I also had a session on the 23rd, but I picked the other one. So I'll start with that one. I have 3 listed, and then I'll say which one I'll actually go to of the 3. But the afternoon session of the 23rd was the one that had 4 second-round ties that I'm looking forward to, as opposed to ones that have 3 first round and 1 second, or the one session that has 2 of each. And that's because, if you look at just the combination of players, look at the seeds. Okay, Josh Rock hasn't matched his brilliant first season, but he's still been pretty darn good. Ryan Searle has looked great at times, and I think has been more consistent than he's ever been. Stephen Bunting, I talked about earlier in the show, I think it's been his best year in the PDC, even better than his debut year a decade ago. And Nathan Aspinall has only gone and won a major this year, no big deal. So you have a really good cast of seeds. But then look at the potential Pro Tour qualifiers. If Luke Woodhouse gets through, Luke Woodhouse has been one of the breakthrough players this year, making his first PDC ranking final, making it through to the World Grand Prix and some other major events. He's never been to one of those elusive events like the Match Play or the Grand Prix, which are limited to 32 before. He got through to it this year, but he has a tough match against Barry Vampire, and whoever gets through that will be a real challenge for Josh Rock. And then if you look, who does Stephen Bunting have? I think he has one of the toughest second round ties of any of the seeds, going against Ryan Joyce, who just won a title, or Alex Spellman, who I said earlier is one of the better players, if not the best player on the CDC circuit recently. The only thing that Alex Spellman hasn't been able to do is beat Stowe Bunce. He's at a higher average than Stowe Bunce all 5 times they played, but somehow lost all 5 of those matches. But beyond that, Alex Spellman has won a plethora of titles recently. So I think that's a session where you have a lot of really informed seeds, but at least 2 of them have really tough draws. But I picked 2 other sessions, also both evening sessions, and one of them has some of the players you mentioned, but it's the first round matches for them, and that's the evening of the 19th. You mentioned Steve Beaton, Russell Nyman. You mentioned Ricardo Pietreczko, Mikuru Suzuki, both of whom, the winners of both of those matches who will come back on that last afternoon before the Christmas break. But I think those are 2 first-round ties that I'd like to see. Beaton has struggled for much of the second half of the year, but in the last few weeks has started to play well again. The last few weeks of the Pro Tour season. But Russell Nyman has been electric on the development tour, and I think he has every chance to beat Steve Beaton in that match. If he actually, I haven't seen the odds, I would assume he's the favorite. But I'm excited to see how he does in the World Championship. Pietreczko Suzuki, I think, can be a real tough tie. Obviously, Pietreczko just won his first Eurotour title in the last Eurotour event. But we also know Mikuru Suzuki is a player who, in a World Championship final over best of 5 sets, averaged north of 90 before. She is a very capable player, and to see her return against men, I think I'm really excited to see, because I think if she's playing well, she can beat a very tough opponent. But then also the De Decker Horvat match, I think, is one that is easy to ignore. But Mike De Decker, he's just been steady all year. We think about that first half of the year where he made a final, got through to qualify for everything. He hasn't had as many results, but he's still playing fairly close to how he was in the first half of the year, even though he hasn't had anything noticeable over the last few months. I still think he's playing like a top 32 player. But Dragutin Horvat's a player who is a very difficult opponent. I think he's a player who, he is a player who has been so close so many times. He's missed starts on multiple occasions to win a tour card. He's missed starts on multiple occasions to qualify for the World Championships. Looked like it was going to happen again, but then he got through in that Super League final to qualify here. I think that's a tough tie. And then obviously MVG against probably Keen Barry, although Barry has a tough draw against one of the Asian qualifiers, I think is a great match. And then I think that's the session I would pick, but I do want to just quickly mention the evening session on the 20th, the Ryan Joyce, Alex Spellman match, which I mentioned earlier, to see Richard Veenstra, who I talked about earlier, another player who I guess could qualify as a dark horse because he is so much better than his results this year, to see Luke Littler, and then obviously the Peter Wright, Jim Williams, most likely Jim Williams, but maybe Norman Madu match. I think that's also a very, very interesting session.